This is Deborah Johnson for Women at Halftime, and I'm passionate about helping women use their untapped skills, resources, and talents to create their ideal work and lifestyle, making a difference in their second half. Well, it is so great to be here. I'm so thrilled to have Alison with us today, Alison Morrow. And she is what I call like an expert on homeschooling. Well, she may not call herself an expert. She has an organization, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation because I'm a big believer in homeschooling because I did homeschool for at least several years. But before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. We are looking toward a new year very soon as this airs, 2021. Does that seem possible? Although many people just wanted 2020 to be over with everything that has gone on, just the chaos and the virus and the shutdowns. And it's just, what a year. Anyway, we have a new program this next year. I have waited for a while to launch, and it's called Hero Mountain Summit. And you just all of those words together, you can find at heromountainsummit.com. It's actually a 5-month program, and I'm only going to run it twice a year. And it's very intensive, but very supportive in getting you going again. There's never been a better time to do this than now. And it's the reason why I'm doing this. I don't really have to do something like this, but I really want to do this because I really want you to succeed. So look that up, heromountainsummit.com. So, and I'll announce what's next week after our episode. I'm so excited. I really want to get to this episode. So Alison, I had first heard about you because I met your father, who is a speaker, and how many books has he authored? Like 20 or
oh my word, lots.
Lots of books. Bestsellers, and just amazing author, and in the Christian market. And he said, "Oh, well, my daughter is author too," and that's how he introduced you. She's written novels. I said, "Wow, that's quite admirable." So he said, but she got kind of out of it because they just don't make money. So,
that is true. It is very sad, but true.
Very sad, but true. And we know, I've been in the entertainment business for such a long time with CDs. They're more of a promotional tool, and so are books many times. Alison, just give me a little bit of your background in that and how that kind of led you to where you are today.
Oh gosh. Well, I originally, way back before I even started writing books, I was a teacher. And I taught elementary school. I had always wanted to be a teacher and a writer. So I'm one of those few people who is actually doing what I said I wanted to do when I was like 8 years old. But I was a teacher for 6 years, and it was a very eye-opening experience. I didn't have kids yet when I had first started. I wasn't even married yet. But before I had even finished my degree program, I already knew that as much as I loved teaching, someday I was going to want to homeschool my kids. Wow. And fast forward a little bit, when my kids were little, that was when I actually was doing my writing at first. And it was really wonderful to be able to have them home, to never have to worry about, I need to spend this time writing, but it's the only time they're home. And so I'm missing this. I got to work everything around, our schedule. And when they got to school age, I realized we didn't want that to change. And I thought back to the time that I'd spent as a teacher and just the difficulty that I had as a teacher trying to, make things work for the kids who were on this end of the, intelligence bell curve, and for the kids at the other end and the kids in the middle, and dealing with all of these other issues, and then starting to see that schools and what schools were teaching was changing, and wondering, is that really where I want my kids as a Christian? And my husband and I decided, you know what, I think we're going to homeschool. And our first 2 years of homeschooling were absolutely awful. It was a total nightmare. We had no idea what we were doing. And I thought for sure it would be easy because I was a teacher. So really, how hard could it be? If I can run a classroom of 24 kids, I can certainly teach my own too. That was kind of what we thought. And then we started and realized, oh my goodness, no, it is absolutely nothing like a classroom. And that's kind of one of the main points of homeschooling, is that it is not like the classroom. And after we came out of those 2 years, we realized, man, there has got to be an easier way to launch your homeschool journey. It was complete trial and error. And we thought somebody needs to make a system. And then we kind of thought maybe we need to make that system. And so
Wow.
that was how it started. And Goodschooling has now been around for almost 5 years. And that's what we do. I have a course and a membership that I use to walk people through laying a solid foundation that they can launch their homeschool adventure from, so that they don't have the same experience we had of constant trial and error and lost money and lost time and massive amounts of frustration.
That is so good that you share your story like that, because there are a lot of people in that same situation
Yes.
right now,
Right?
struggling because they never in the world would they have thought they would be doing this.
Yeah.
And as you said, you have been, a Christian and have strong faith, but there are so many people from every area. I mean,
Absolutely.
every background, every area. And it is not just, I think people just think it's maybe, these little groups going. And
Mhm.
that's why I'm bringing that up.
Yeah.
Because, I was when I homeschooled, there were Latter-day Saints. There were all sorts of groups that were a part of this, but they had that same conviction. But it is a little different. And we'll talk about some of those differences. But I really like the fact that you came from such an educational background, because you also know what's important for education, and that gives you an extra edge, and that you've struggled, and
Yeah.
you know how different that is.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I can absolutely put myself in almost anybody's shoes. We've had kids, with ADHD. We've had kids with learning disabilities. We've schooled during a move, lots of the things that parents find themselves dealing with are things that we've had to deal with as well. So it was frustrating at the time, but
right.
it makes it easier, I should say, easier for me to relate to people who are going through all these different things. I'm like, I know how hard it is. I've been there.
Yes.
Let me help you.
Yes.
I know how to make it better. I really do.
And it's so great. I mean, I feel the same way when I'm putting courses together. It's like,
Mhm.
I'm going to save you some time and money. All
Yes.
you have to do
Yeah.
is sign on. And, there's so much validity to that. And it's very, very important. It's part of my new keynote that I'm putting together as well, and how important that coaching and that guidance is. It really,
Mm-hmm.
really, really helps people at the very top levels. They don't quit getting help. They're just, in
Right.
fact, they get.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So that's kind of comes me to my first little question here. Can people homeschool even if they weren't good students themselves? That's a that's someone's thinking, but I failed math. Ever teach it?
Math. Oh my gosh. That's the thing that freaks out nearly every
Yes.
parent. They're like, but I can't possibly teach math.
Yes.
And yes, it's funny, when I was a kid and back in the 80s, when virtually nobody was homeschooling, I begged my mom to homeschool me. I hated school, which is kind of weird. Like, why did I go into education? But I did. I hated school. But my mom was like, are you kidding me? I barely made it through school myself. There is absolutely no way I'm going to homeschool you. Are you out of your mind? What is homeschooling anyway? Like, where are you getting this idea? And now, one of the fantastic things about homeschooling now is that it has become such a huge market that
Mhm.
there is so much in the way of coaching and assistance and resources, courses that teach themselves, curriculum that comes, with the DVD. You just pop it in and you can sit and learn with your child. That's really one of the best things about homeschooling, is that when we as adults think back to our own education, how many of us can say that we remember everything that we learned?
Yes.
Literally none of us. And so a lot of times we think, oh, that means I can't teach it if I can't remember it.
Mhm.
But the great thing about homeschooling is you come alongside your child and you say, let's learn this together. I don't remember any of this myself. Let's learn it together. And so you put in the DVD, or you start the video, or you read the teacher's manual, and you go, oh, that's how that works. Oh, okay, I vaguely remember this now, or I don't remember ever learning this at all, but this is really cool. And so, no, you don't have to have been a good student. You don't have to be a teacher, because you have all the materials that you need to help your kids learn what they need to learn, and to learn it right along with them.
That is really exciting because that does scare a lot
Mhm.
of parents. And I find that in music because I have a course that's very appropriate for homeschoolers, an
Awesome.
online course called Keys to the Keyboard. And I encourage parents learn it right along. Oh, but I'm
Yep.
not a musician, and my kids they'll never be they don't have it needs to be part of their program, just go little by little by little
Mhm.
and have fun. Just
Yep.
have fun. They
Yeah.
do. They have everything and so much. I mean, with video and online courses right now, that's exploded. It
Oh,
absolutely exploded.
huge. There is something for everybody. There really is. Whether you want absolutely no part in teaching it, or
Mhm.
you just want someone to give the instruction and you're okay, grading the problems and that sort of thing. Or if you just need, the answer key and you're fairly sure that you know how to teach it, but at least, if you've got that teacher's edition, you've got the information there that you need. And parents find it's not nearly as difficult as they thought it was going to be.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up that point that there are full programs that do
Oh
all
yeah.
the teaching for you.
Hmm.
All of it's all on video,
Yep.
and I found that as I never went that route, but I had friends that did. They just they signed on to that, and sometimes that's almost too rigorous for the kids. So because it does go pretty more intense and a lot of video work, as we've
Yeah.
found how difficult that is for a lot of kids just to sit
Right.
there in front of that screen.
Yeah.
So, I think the interaction and the activity, that's just so, so important. And
Mhm.
here's another good one because this was actually a little surprising to me, even though I've written a book called Music for Kids too. And this is in the music area because I've just had so much background and taught for
Mhm.
so many years. But it was surprising how many like grandparents are are teaching their kids.
Yes.
How can people what's that process? Can people homeschool their grandkids and their nieces and nephews? And I also wanted to see what that legality and everything, how
Mhm.
that works along that,
Yeah.
being able to do that.
So all of the homeschooling laws that we have in the United States are by state. There is no national or federal level homeschooling requirements or anything like that. Everything is at the state level. And so what makes that one of the reasons why that's a good thing is that you can work at the local level to change those laws if you're not happy with them. But one of the things that's kind of frustrating is that there are no blanket statements that we can make for all the homeschoolers.
That's true.
But in most states, you can homeschool your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, even your neighbors, even your best friend's kid. There are some states that do have requirements that you be the legal guardian,
Mhm.
but and there are some states that have a requirement, not many, but there are some states that require that you have a certain level of education yourself. And
Mm,
so it is important. That's always kind of our first stopping point. The first milestone you need to hit when you first start homeschooling is figuring out exactly what your laws for your state say. But in most states, you can either provide all of that instruction yourself, or you can kind of come in almost like a tutor.
yeah,
And so, really, mom and dad are the official homeschoolers, but you get to kind of come in as, the consultant. And you
right.
can come and help on certain things, or you can even just act as a mentor, or
Mhm.
even just act as someone, who maybe you're not officially homeschooling them, but you're letting them stay at your house while mom and dad go to work and
Right.
watching to make sure they get their work done. So there's different ways, depending on the state, you can kind of work around some of these requirements too. But generally speaking, yes, absolutely. And I'm seeing more and more in my group on Facebook. I've been getting a ton of grandparents who are saying, my daughter or my son, they need to work, but the school system is a disaster for my grandchildren, and they don't want to put them in, but they work full time, and they didn't know how they were going to homeschool, and so I said, okay, I'll give it a shot, and God bless them, because, when you're going into your retirement, probably the last thing you're thinking is, and now I'm
Yes.
going to bring on my 8-year-old grandchild and do math. But again, because there's so much stuff out there to help them, a
Mhm.
lot of times what kids really need is just somebody there, you
Yes.
know? And so the same rule goes for grandparents who think, I can't teach. I don't know how to relate to these kids or what to do with them, or, you don't necessarily have to. Sometimes you just have to be the adult on call so
Right.
that those, kind of keeping them accountable for doing what they need to do and, give them that opportunity to be homeschooled that they maybe wouldn't get otherwise.
That's such a great point. And I think, well, at least at this time through COVID, some of those regulations have been really loosened up because we've been forced into this. Everybody was forced to keep their kids home, of course, so they've got to homeschool. And I don't know how that'll continue. Hopefully it'll stay with the states. And it is smart if it's at the, the local level. It should be at that level because every
Yeah,
community is different as well.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's the way our Constitution was written. And it was
Exactly.
pretty
Right.
smart. I tell you, they were very smart. People try to discount that, but
Very.
they were very smart. I tell you.
And note that all of the gentlemen who wrote that Constitution were homeschooled.
Yeah. Hey, you know your stuff, Allison. So, well, what is the if someone's just starting out on this, what is the most important first step to take when wanting to homeschool? I mean, you already mentioned that you have to find out your local, laws and things,
Right.
but
Right.
or if they need to homeschool, what if they've even been putting this off? What's that first step?
So the first thing that you want to do is something that probably you haven't even heard of before, and it's something called deschooling.
Mm,
And what it is, it's essentially like doing an educational detox.
mm,
So if you think about your own thoughts about education, now you were a homeschooler for a while, so you
right.
probably have gone through this process without even realizing that you did it. But for
Mhm,
most people, particularly those who had no plans ever to homeschool,
mhm,
they have been inundated and indoctrinated really with a certain idea of what education looks like. It
mm,
has to be like this. It has to happen this way. It has to have these materials, and so for them to really open themselves up to their full homeschooling potential, they have to rid themselves a lot of these assumptions, these myths, these things that they've just assumed. Well, of course, you need this in order to have an education, because when you homeschool, you're not just bringing home the conventional approach to education. You're not just taking a classroom and plopping it in your family room.
right.
You have so much more freedom. You have the ability to teach your children in an organic, natural way.
Mm,
And if the only approach to education that you are aware of is that conventional approach, then you're never going to be able to homeschool to your full potential because you're not going to know what your options are.
right.
And so when you take this time to detox yourself, to separate your beliefs about education from this conventional system that you've been, indoctrinated with, and you start learning about all of the other philosophies about education that exist out there,
Mhm,
it starts to show you, oh gosh, we don't have to use workbooks for everything. We don't have to use textbooks for everything. We don't have to schedule our day so that school has a specific starting and ending point. There are all these things that you start to realize about education. And even if you still plan to take a somewhat more conventional approach,
mhm.
just by having that knowledge and just by kind of opening yourself up to these different ideas, it helps you to have a little more flexibility so that you can better tailor what you're doing to your kids' needs and, better customize what they're learning and how they learn it so that education isn't something dull and boring that they can't wait to finish, but
Right.
is something that they enjoy and it encourages them to become lifelong learners.
That's
So taking this detox period, it's just like, if you want to completely change your health, you don't start by just pounding down a whole bunch of supplements and hope that it works. Usually you start with something to like cleanse your system, right? Like you do a detox, and it's the same idea, and it works the same way for kids too, because all that they know about education is that system that they've been in. And particularly if they had a really bad experience in that
Mm,
system, if
mm.
you bring them home and start trying to teach them, they've got all these negative ideas about education. And just because now they get to do it in their pajamas in the family room does not mean all of a sudden they're going to enjoy it.
Right.
So you want to give them that time to detox and be able to start understanding what it really means to learn and enjoy learning and be able to chase their own interests and reignite their natural curiosity.
Yeah.
And so detoxing, that deschooling period helps them to do that as well.
What a great point. I've really never heard somebody totally say that about homeschooling. And it really is a great point because we have to do that with our bodies. I
Yep.
mean, how many supplements are there to help you detox?
Right.
Oh, yeah, I got to go on a diet. I got to detox, whatever. Like, oh, it sounds just horrible. So, but really, it's a mindset.
Hmm.
Is that you are changing your mindset and of your children if they've been brought out of school, especially
Yep.
because if they've been in the classroom. Now, our boys were never in the classroom. Now, our youngest was kind of burnt out because was working, doing all these things as
Yeah.
well, and I was ready, to have a little break.
Uh-huh.
He would have thrived as a homeschooler. That's my one little regret. I should have spent a little more time with our third and extremely talented little guy. And I think it would have helped him emotionally through those years as the youngest child.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was the oldest. I thought, oh, he's going to be fine. So, well, what kind of curriculum should homeschoolers look for? And just let's focus on some of the basics of just, what to look for. And that's going to be at different levels, I'm sure, because you've
Oh,
got
yeah.
an elementary level, you've got a mid school but what type of curriculum and where do you find it?
Mhm.
So,
So, one of the things a lot of people don't realize about curriculum is that every curriculum is written to align with a particular methodology, a particular mindset about what education should look like. And so, for example, the materials that you find in a typical school are written with that conventional mindset towards education. Here's a textbook, here's a workbook, here's the test booklet,
mhm.
you know. Um, but there are like 8 different methodologies
Mm,
that you can follow to educate, 8 different educational methodologies.
mm,
And so curriculum is written to align with one of those methodologies. And
okay.
so one of the scariest things when you first start homeschooling
Mhm.
is that people will typically go on Google and then they'll search homeschool curriculum. And
Yes.
then they see that there's like 4.2 billion options and they go, "Oh my word, I can't possibly do this. How on earth am I supposed to decide?" And so one of the things that makes it so much easier is if you first focus on what methodology you want to follow.
Mm,
Because if you know that, then you're automatically taking tons of options off the table and you're significantly narrowing your options, not just to make things easier, but also to put you in connection with curriculum that's going to actually align with your own beliefs. Because whatever you believe about education is going to cause you to align with a particular methodology.
right.
And so when you're going through that detoxing period, that deschooling period, one of the things that parents should do, and it is or grandparents, whoever's going to be doing the homeschooling, one of the things that they should do is to learn about these different methodologies, things like Waldorf, Montessori,
Mhm,
unit studies, Charlotte Mason, um, classical education, and project based and unschooling.
mhm.
Because when you start learning about these, um, first of all, it's helping you do that detox because it's
Yeah.
opening you up to all these other ideas about what education looks like.
Mhm,
But then it's also helping you figure out, okay, when we start, what's our roadmap going to look like? Which of these methodologies are we going to follow so that we have a framework? And
mhm.
so once you've figured that out and you've kind of come out of some of that detoxing, deschooling period, then you can say, okay, I've done all this research. I really like the looks of, let's say, Charlotte Mason homeschooling.
Mhm.
Well, now when you go to look for curriculum, you can look for Charlotte Mason homeschool curriculum. And so now you're going to have way fewer choices, which is a good thing. You don't want 8 million choices. You're
No,
never
you
going to
don't.
find the right thing. And so now, if you really are just going to do the kind of trial and error thing, at least you've got it. You're starting at a much better place because you're working with curriculum that all is created to align with the principles of that methodology. And
Mm,
since you have decided you also align with that methodology, then this curriculum is much more likely to work for you than just going out and Googling and, going to the bookstore and browsing around and trying to figure out what you're going to use. Um, there are some methodologies like unschooling, which I mentioned a minute ago, that don't actually use curriculum. They
mm.
Unschoolers learn through life. They don't have school time during their day. They wake up in the morning, their kids do their chores, their kids do, whatever classes they maybe feel like going to, or whatever things they've signed up to do, whatever activities they're in. But the children are free to follow whatever interests they have. And it's a philosophy that aligns with a very specific parenting philosophy as well.
Yes.
But when you put those two together, that kind of philosophy is not going to allow a whole bunch of screen time. These are not kids who are going to sit on video screens all day,
Right.
They're reading books. They are learning skills. They're learning at a very early age the kinds of things that they're interested in. And so they deep dive on those things. If they decide they want to use curriculum, then the kid says, hey, I'd like to get a program for this or whatever. But that's why it's so important to think about what methodology you want to follow. Because if you find unschooling really aligns with what you do, then you don't want to waste any money on curriculum at all, because your kids may never use any of it. So it's important to start there, thinking about methodology. What are the different philosophies? And then once you've aligned with one and you start looking at curriculum, one of the greatest things about homeschooling is that there is a huge market for used curriculum. So you look at some of these packages and they can be so expensive and they're worth the money. But if you don't mind using used curriculum, which often just means that books that have been read a bunch,
Yeah.
then you can get programs at a fraction of the cost, because you're just buying it from another homeschooler who's gone through it and they're like, you know what, we don't need these textbooks anymore. You'll maybe have to get the workbook, because that's the thing that's consumable. Kids are going to be writing in that. You're not usually going to find those for sale.
Right.
But a workbook or a textbook that was maybe $80, you might be able to pick up for 20.
Wow.
Or 15, or, so Facebook is a fantastic place to look, because there are tons of used homeschool curriculum groups that are specifically for buying and selling. And there are even groups that are for specific publishers. So if there's, a particular company that, you want to get curriculum from that particular company, you can even just look for that company and you'll find buying and selling groups as well. So that's one of the best ways to start, because particularly in the beginning, when you're still kind of doing that trial and error thing,
Right.
the last thing you want to do is drop $1,000 on brand new curriculum.
Yes.
And then realize 3 weeks later, oh, this does not work for us,
Yes.
which is what we did our first year. So speaking from experience here.
This is such valuable information, and it's come so far since I homeschooled even. So, I mean,
just in the last 10 years, there's been a huge explosion.
huge.
And so,
huge.
yeah, things have changed.
I mean, there's these huge conferences. There was nothing like that.
Oh, man.
And the first thing that, kind of came into play was our local, I was down in Orange County, California. And so the Orange County district decided, oh, we want to be a piece of this. So they started a little bit of their, group homes. I could sign up through them, although I wasn't really through them. I just got all the books through them if I wanted to. And I didn't even end up using a lot of them because I didn't like them.
Yeah.
And I bought my own material. But it really has come a long way, a whole long way. It's been,
oh gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really fun. So, well, let's talk about where your kids, and I don't know how long you plan on homeschooling. You might homeschool all the way through, and how well they do. Are they, can they go to college and get athletic, academic scholarships and all of this? And can they be even involved? And I know some of the answers to that, but I would love to hear that directly from you.
Yeah. This has been, and again, this is due to how homeschooling has exploded.
Yes.
Colleges are starting to actively recruit and seek out homeschoolers because they find that, first of all, they have not had the love of learning stamped out of them. They're self-motivated. They know how to direct their own learning. They know what they want. So many kids nowadays go to college having absolutely no idea what they want to do because they've been so busy just with school. They haven't had the opportunity to try, to maybe shadow somebody or be mentored by somebody or, kind of do a deep dive on what this particular career looks like or that particular career looks like because they have no time to do those things.
Yes.
Whereas homeschoolers, when you homeschool, you can do an entire day's worth of education in 3 to 4 hours, sometimes, and less than that if your kids are younger. And
Yeah.
so they've got all this extra time that they can try new activities, try new jobs, go shadow somebody at their office for a day, see what this career is really like. And so when they get to college, they're driven. They know exactly what they want to do. They have spent time already in that field quite often because they have the time to do it. And they actually tend to perform better educationally, academically, than conventionally schooled kids do once they even get to college. So, yes, they absolutely can go to college. And one of the things that people kind of assume is that must mean that you have to follow the same kind of curriculum that the traditional schools follow, so that your child, is doing all of the quote unquote college prep type stuff.
Right.
But that's not even necessarily the case. Those unschoolers I talked about earlier, who don't even use curriculum, they can still go to college, even if they have never cracked open a textbook in their life.
Wow.
And there are people like myself who work as coaches specifically to help homeschooling parents put together transcripts, figure out, how can we take what your kids have been doing, the interests they have, the work that they've done, and fashion that into something that a college can look at and say, oh, this looks like this kid would be a great fit for us. And yes, they can do scholarships. We actually, here in Texas has one of the largest homeschooling communities in the country.
Oh, I believe it.
Well, not just because Texas is so huge, but we have virtually no regulation. So it's very, very, very easy to homeschool here. And just here in our area, we're just north of Houston, and we have at least 3 homeschool athletic organizations. And every year, multiple kids get athletic scholarships, having competed just through those homeschool organizations. So just because it's homeschool, quote unquote, does not mean that it is somehow less than, the opportunity that they would have in traditional school. And in some states, in almost half of the states in the country, homeschoolers can actually participate in public school classes and sports and extracurriculars.
Yes.
So if you have a child, who really wants to do football or wants to do theater or whatever, depending on where you live, they may be able to do that in the public school as well, which is also going to give them access to those scholarships and things like that. But absolutely, that there is no reason why a homeschooled child can't take the same kind of post high school path that traditionally schooled kids do. And more colleges are finding that these are the kids they want. So puts them in a great position. Like they're being actively sought after.
That's great news. And I know here we are in Southern California, and I know that you are able to put them in the athletic programs and, even some of the music programs. Mm-hmm. So, and all of those, if there's one locally that you want to do this, you have to be willing to, jump through the hoops. And because there will be people telling you that you can't, but you legally can.
Yes.
So but state by state and your districts, and you just need to find out, don't be afraid to go to the top, figure it out.
Exactly. Well, and, again, because we have so many families that are coming into homeschooling now, homeschooling is going to make a huge leap this year, and it's not going to go down, No, and so with that increase in demand, there's going to be an increase in supply. And so if you are looking in your area and you're not seeing what you want for your kids, sometimes all it takes is hopping onto that local homeschool Facebook group and saying, hey, my kid would love to be able to do whatever it is that you can't find, soccer or whatever. Are there any other kids out there? What can we do? Sometimes, one of the things about homeschooling is parents do sometimes need to make some sacrifice of their own time to make those opportunities available for their kids. But it's something for the whole community. I mean, it's not just your child that's going to benefit when you do that. You're opening up opportunity for other families, and those families are going to come on and work with you and help you make this thing possible because they want the same thing for their kids. Every parent wants their child to be able to do the things they want to do. And so as we see this increase, there's going to be more and more families that you can network with, that you can get together with and say, hey, what is our homeschool community missing? Let's fill in these gaps. Let's get together and get these programs started.
Well, in most, even if they are in a classroom or in a regular school, a public school, there's boosters and all of those. They
Mhm.
have to have that support.
Right.
They would not be able to run without that.
Yeah.
So you just have to decide what you're going to give your time to. And
Mhm.
when our kids were coming through, I directed musicals for them. And we did fun little musicals. But boy, I had a full team. I was not doing that thing by myself.
Yeah.
And I did not have to think about costumes. I didn't have to think about dance. I didn't have to think about, scheduling the venue. I nothing.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
just got to focus on those kids, and they did a great job
Yeah.
because they wanted to perform. They wanted to learn their parts and all of that. So, and make sure I had all the other stuff that I could do best. So,
Mhm.
once people start coming around and they'll say, oh, I haven't danced for years, but I'd love to be able to do that.
Yep.
Really fun. And they had such a great experience, so you just
That's
have to,
awesome.
it depends where you are
Yep.
and
Yep.
what you need to do. So,
Mhm.
well, we already sort of answered this. How can I homeschool if I'm not a teacher? I've heard that.
Easily.
Yes, I've heard that a lot too,
Oh
of
yeah.
people not confident with that. And as you said, how important these support groups are and being together. And there are even groups that will get together that will do, you go to this house this day for art, or you go to
Mhm.
this house, and you can kind of rotate. And we did some of that as well.
Yeah.
It was really nice. And it just would depend on the person involved, whether they were organized or not sometimes. So,
Right. Yeah. We've
learn
done a
really
co-op.
fast. You learn. Okay.
Yep. Oh, totally. Yeah. We've done a co-op for a couple years now with a good friend of ours, and it's just her and her kids and
Yeah.
me and one of my kids. Only one of my kids participates. But
Yeah.
I hate teaching science. I love science. Like as a subject, I could read
Yeah.
about it all day. But I'm not let's go do the experiment kind of a mom. Whereas my friend Lana loves to do all that. That's like her favorite thing in the world. But she is not a fan of teaching English. Well, I not only was a novelist, but I was an English teacher for 3 years. Or 2 years. So we trade off. So every Wednesday we go to her house and she does all the fun sciencey stuff. And I teach all of the writing and the grammar. And so it's, 2-3 hours out of my week every week, but I get to take something off my plate that I
Yes.
don't enjoy and that I would not do justice, and
Yes.
let somebody else do a really, really good job with that. And then I
Right.
get to do what I enjoy. I love teaching writing and English and
Oh.
grammar. And so, yeah, co-ops like that, there are tons of those have popped up.
Right.
Um, what have I been seeing them called? Like pods, pandemic pods.
Oh,
People have been
that's
calling them
funny.
pandemic pods. And it's like, people in the neighborhood saying, hey, look, our neighborhood, we've got 8 families here whose kids aren't going to be going back to school. Let's share the load. And that's really what it is. It's just sharing the load. And
That's great.
so there are so many different options like that,
Mhm.
which not only helps you as the parent, but it gives the kids that opportunity to meet other homeschoolers, to be able to
Yes.
spend time with kids, not just be home all the time. And, that whole socialization thing that people always freak out about and don't have to freak out about. That's one of the many ways that kids can get that time with other kids, is just by, getting it together and learning stuff together.
Right. Yeah, and that is a concern for many, that socialization, but it's really not an issue.
No.
Your kids, there are so many opportunities, and you take away some of those bullying times, and you're able to keep affirming your kids, and they can still
Mhm.
stand up strong. You can give them those tools and all of that. So it's a really important point there. We didn't even really touch on that this week. We've had so many other things to touch, and I've learned some things. This has been so much
Oh,
fun.
good.
I want to approach one more thing, and then I would love you to tell a little bit about how people can contact you, and what resources you've had, and even about your Facebook group. But there's a good question. This is a really important one, because I do have friends that have children, actually grandchildren, with learning challenges and disabilities.
Mhm.
How can you? How do you adapt to this? And you may not feel even qualified. And um, what sort of resources are there for those sort of kids and that sort of situation?
Yeah. One of the things, the longer I've homeschooled and the more families I've worked with, the more confident I have become that the best place for a child with learning disabilities is homeschool,
Mm.
because it's that one-on-one time that they cannot get at school. Even if they're working with a resource teacher, they only get time with that teacher for maybe a half hour or maybe an hour. Even if they're in a special class where it's just them and a couple other kids, there's still other kids.
Yeah.
And that teacher is never going to know that child as well as the parent does.
Mhm.
And, I have a number of friends who unfortunately have children with very severe medical needs. They have medically fragile children.
Mm.
Those parents know more about their children's diagnosis than most doctors do, because they spend so much time researching because it's their kid. The exact same thing is true when it's your child. You are so much more motivated to figure out exactly what's going on here. Let's get to the bottom of this. What's the problem? But not only that, when you homeschool, you get to tailor everything to your child's strengths. And so, whereas when they're in the classroom, when they're in school, traditional, conventional school, they are being expected to fit into one particular mold. And even the resource that they get, even the therapy that they may get at school, that therapy is specifically focused on helping them function in the classroom. It's not about let's try to fix this or cure this or help you overcome this in a general sense for your life. It's about how can we get you into the classroom so that you can learn the same way as everybody else. That is what school therapy is focused on. And so I've had parents tell me that, their therapist at school was working on the child getting on and off the school bus. That was what they were learning in therapy. She's like, but I drive my kid to school. He doesn't even take the bus. Why on earth are we doing this? That was what his therapy was for. And she's like, this child can't read and he's 10 years old and they're making him get on and off a bus. How on earth is this helping him for his life? Right. And so that was when she was like, I am done with this. I'm bringing him home. I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to teach him. I don't know how I'm going to make this kid, how we're going to educate him. But getting him home and focusing on his strengths instead of on his weakness, which is all he was ever confronted with at school. Oh, you can't do this. We need to work on this. Oh, you can't do this. Now it was, what can you do? Let's take a look at what you can do and let's do as much of that as possible. And then let's leverage that to teach you the other things that you're struggling with. And just by having that one-on-one time in an environment that had way fewer distractions, that did not have a teacher who's flitting from one kid to the next, trying to, keep all these squirrels in line, and being able to, have someone who was consistent with them every single day, doing the, exactly what they needed. All of a sudden, this kid blossomed.
Wow.
And he was doing things that the school teacher, the special ed teacher was saying he would probably never be able to do.
Wow.
And within 2 years of homeschooling, he was reading fluently, not just, kind of reading. This was a kid who went from not reading at all to reading books. And they'd been told, well, I don't know if he'll ever read, And so, yes, it can feel very, very overwhelming. And depending on, if you have a child with multiple diagnoses, then yes, it's going to take some time to kind of wrap your head around, okay, how are we going to do this exactly? But again, there are so many resources. There are groups on Facebook. There's curriculum that is specific. Like if you have a child with dyslexia, there's curriculum that is specifically written for the dyslexic brain. But quite often it's not a specific curriculum that you need. It's just that freedom to customize and to tailor and to, pick and choose what are the really important things that we're going to work on here and be able to use that curriculum in a way that works for that child instead of just using it the way it was written to be used.
Right.
Just by being able to do those things and tailoring to them, they are going to get so much further and be so much more confident, be so much more at peace. I mean, so many problems that we see with kids with special needs in school, it's not the diagnosis that's a problem. It's this extra anxiety and fear that comes alongside with it because they're in this environment that is expecting them to be someone that they are not.
Wow.
And so when we get them home, so many of those issues disappear. And even things like kids with ADHD.
Yes.
You bring them home. Well, now they're not being expected to sit in a desk for 6 hours.
Yes.
It's amazing what happens when you free a kid up from having to sit at a desk, So the problems that the teacher was complaining about all the time,
Mhm.
suddenly those things aren't problems because you're
Yeah.
not trying to force your kid to be someone who they are not and to fit into that mold. You're allowing them to be them fully and figuring out how are we going to teach you the way that you are.
Yes. And I think you brought up something just real quick there, because I think some parents who have special needs kids, they're going to face burnout.
Mhm.
Because all of a sudden, if this is your responsibility, you're going, how can I handle this by myself? And
Mhm.
here I'm trying to balance a job too, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
do everything, and maybe I can do part of that at home now. And
Mhm.
some of those families, there's just a lot that they are balancing. So as you mentioned, some of those support groups, how important those are, or even getting together with one other family
Mhm.
that can share the load a little bit, and you can help each other along on that. I think that is one of the best things that we can do for each other right now, and to seek those out and to use some of the social media,
Mhm.
as much as we, you know, I don't like to be on social media that much. It's like a rabbit hole.
Yeah, seriously.
Yes, yeah, you get to really involve. But if you focus, on a couple of those areas,
Mhm.
because you really do, you need to think about your own, burnout as well as a parent, because you don't want to be yelling at your kids and really frustrated at your kids all the time.
Mhm.
And that will happen. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Occasionally.
it's kind of, yeah. I mean, we're kind of real people,
We're human. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're human.
Yes, definitely, definitely. This has been just, I mean, I have learned some things here
Oh, I'm
today,
so glad.
just amazing, with just the inroads and all of the things that you've had to share. And I'd love, I mean, are there any closing comments here? And I want to just you give everyone, how do we contact you? Do you have any resources people can get kind of right away? And what is
Yeah.
your Facebook group? That's a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll get them all. It's all good. I probably the best place to start would be my blog. It is not the typical homeschooling blog. So if you're like, oh, another homeschooling blog,
Mhm.
no, this is different. So if you go to goodschooling.net/blog, I only have about 12 articles on there, but they are all very specifically tailored to helping families start homeschooling. So there is a how to start homeschooling article. There's an article on how to homeschool while you have to work. There's one on homeschooling kids with special needs, how to choose curriculum,
Mm.
how to homeschool young kids, little kids, because
Mm.
that actually looks very, very different from what people typically think it should look like.
Yes.
And so if you start there, all of those articles are very content rich. So these are not, just like a real quick surfacey kind of guide.
Mhm.
These go in depth into exactly what it is that you need to do. And many of them have downloads that you can get from our resource library.
Oh,
And,
cool.
so that you've got, like the checklist you can put on the fridge or the guide. For example, deschooling. There's an article on deschooling, and it comes with a downloadable guide that tells
Mm.
you here's stuff you can do for yourself. Here's stuff you can do to help your kids deschool. So that is the best place to start because it's going to give you everything you need to kind of get your feet wet and
Good.
start making that move. And sometimes that's all anybody needs is they just kind of need that guidance.
Yes.
If you want to be able to talk to other brand new homeschooling parents,
Mhm.
or if you are just homeschool curious, if you're
Mhm.
still trying to decide if this is even what you want to do, or if you've decided you want to, but you're not quite ready to make the leap quite yet,
Mhm.
then on Facebook, my group is called Exploring Homeschool, How to Homeschool. So Exploring Homeschool, How to Homeschool. Free group. We've got nearly 3,000 people in there. And so we get great discussions. It's a fantastic place to come and ask, the questions that are still holding you back, to clarify, some of those things that you're maybe not 100% sure about in your own mind yet. And just to kind of have some, kind of a place to crowdsource,
Good.
and then my coaching program is called the Confident Homeschooler. And that is a monthly subscription model. And it's a membership where you get access to my course. So that's the course that we created to help parents kind of make that leap into homeschooling. It's self-paced, very quick. It's not going to take you months to, finish or anything like that. We do group coaching. I do expert interviews in that group with people who are experts on different methodologies or, in experts on things like teaching kids to read or working with special needs kids, things like that. And you also get private coaching there too. So if you just want someone that you can talk to about, this one particular problem you just can't figure out, or I need to decide between these curriculums and I can't figure it out, whatever, then you have access to all of everything that I can give you. And we do coaching, whenever people need it for that. So all of those, you'll find links to all that stuff at goodschooling.net. So that's
perfect.
That's the starting place is the website.
That is so valuable right now, because there's a lot of people kind of lost and they don't know what next year is going to hold.
Yeah.
And as we are recording this, we're a little bit away from that, but not when this airs, we still may not know what next year holds.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Alison.
Oh, you're so welcome, Deborah. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, fascinating. And you were just so well versed in all of this. Of course, you come from experience, but also
hard-earned experience.
Yes, also kind of stumbling along, and then that's what it kind of lit your fire in helping others, and that's exactly why many of us do what we do, isn't it?
We do, right? Yep. Absolutely. No, I'm so blessed and so excited that I get to take what was such a frustrating time for us and turn it into a way to help people not have to go through what we went through. It's so wonderful to be able to redeem that experience,
Yes. And this, I have a lot of different ages that listen to this podcast, but it's mostly, it's women at halftime. There's men that listen, but those even at halftime, officially over the age of 40, many of them may be, interacting with grandkids at this, very soon stage as well. So it's very, very valuable. So, well, thanks again for being with me today. And make sure for all of you who are listening that you tune in next week. Our subject is setting your New Year's goals and what should you include? Okay. Yes, you might be questioning, what should I include next year? Is it going to be like this one? No, it's going to be different. I have these I'm going to think positively. And, but you want to be looking ahead. You don't want to just stay still, because you're going to be in muddy water then. So as I say, you want to be moving. So make sure that you tune in. And any other places, any other things you need to know, make sure you do look at heromountainsummit.com, my main website, goalsforyourlife.com, and djworksmusic.com. I do have a homeschooling program there with keys to the keyboard. Make sure you check that out. A lot of resources. I'm adding to it, actually, because I'm seeing the need there and what will help people most in that field. I wrote it for music majors, actually, that couldn't pass piano proficiency. And now it's perfect for homeschooling, and it's just perfect. And the adults can go along with it as well. So, well, thank you so much. And I will look forward to being with everyone again next week. And so bye for now. Thank you for joining us on Women at Halftime. Visit goalsforyourlife.com or womenathalftime.com for many more resources, downloads, and programs, or to get in touch with me. I'd love it if you leave me a review and tell your friends. So until next time, this is Deborah Johnson signing off.